Chapter 1. The landscape was green and gently rolling, grazed closely by the hot sun. Above it, the sky was blue, filled with small cotton clouds. It was quiet, as were all of the mornings during this long summer vacation, when even the birds seemed lazy. In the middle of the peaceful valley was a small garden by a river that flowed past an unusual-looking house. It had a long balcony and was made entirely of wood. To one side stood a large garage with a huge wooden water tank perched on top. An old windmill kept watch over the garden, much like a lighthouse watches over its boats. It seemed to turn just for the fun of it in this little corner of paradise. Even the wind blew gently. Nothing on this beautiful morning hinted at the terrible adventure that was about to begin. The front door exploded open. A large woman filled the entryway. "Arthur," she yelled, in a voice that could make glass shatter. Grandma was about 60 years old and rather round, even though her elegant black dress, trimmed with lace, was designed to hide her plumpness. She finished putting on her gloves, adjusted her hat, and yanked violently on the ancient doorbell. "Arthur," she yelled again, no answer. "Where on earth is that boy? And the dog? Has Alfred disappeared too?" Grandma grumbled like a distant storm as she went back into the house. Inside, the wooden floor gleamed with polish, and lace seemed to have conquered all the furniture, the way that ivy takes over walls. Grandma put on her house slippers and crossed the room, muttering, "An excellent watchdog, you'll see. How did I ever fall for that?" She huffed up the stairs. "I wonder what exactly he's watching, this watchdog. He's never in the house to watch it." "He and Arthur just breezed through," she grumbled, opening the door to Arthur's bedroom. Still no sign of Arthur. Do you think it bothers them that their poor grandmother must run after them all day long? Not at all. She continued down the hall. "I don't ask for much, only that he keeps still for just 5 minutes a day, like other 10-year-olds. Suddenly she paused, struck by a thought. She listened to the house, which was unusually silent. Grandma began to speak in a low voice. 5 minutes of peace, when he could play calmly. In a corner, without making any noise, she murmured, gliding toward the end of the hallway. She reached the last door, on which hung a wooden sign engraved with the words "Keep Out." She opened the door quietly and peered into the forbidden room. It was an attic that had been converted into a large office, and it looked like a cross between a merry antique shop and the study of a slightly nutty professor. On either side of the desk were large bookshelves overflowing with leather-bound books. Hanging above it, all was a silk banner bearing a cryptic message. Words often hide other words. Our scholar was also a philosopher. Grandma moved slowly into the middle of the bric-a-brac, all of which had a decidedly African flavor. Around the room, spears seemed to have pushed through the floor like shoots of bamboo. A fantastic collection of African masks hung on the wall. They were magnificent, except for the one that was missing. A lone, telltale nail stuck out of the wall. Aha! Grandma had her first clue. All she had to do now was follow the snores that were becoming more and more audible. Grandma moved farther into the room, and sure enough, discovered Arthur stretched out on the floor, the African mask on his face amplifying his snores. Alfred, of course, was was stretched out alongside him, his tail beating time on the wooden mask. Grandma couldn't help but smile. "You could at least answer when I call you. I've been looking for you for almost an hour," she murmured to the dog, speaking quietly so as not to wake Arthur too suddenly. Alfred put on his best Q10 innocent look. "Oh, don't give me that puppy dog face. You know I don't want you in Grandpa's room and you're not allowed to touch his things," she said firmly, reaching to lift the mask off Arthur. In the light, he had the face of a naughty angel. Alfred whined a little, perhaps out of jealousy. "That's enough, Alfred. If I were you, I would make myself scarce for the next 5 minutes," she said sternly. Alfred took the hint and backed off. Grandma lovingly placed her hand on the boy's face. "Arthur," she murmured. The snoring only became louder. She changed her tone. "Arthur," she thundered, her voice echoing through the room. The boy jumped up with a start, bewildered and ready for battle. "Help and attack. Quick, men. Alfred, form a circle," he shouted, half asleep. Grandma grabbed his shoulders. "Arthur, calm down. It's me. It's Grandma," she barked. Arthur shook himself awake and realized who he was facing. "Oh, sorry, Grandma. I was in Africa." "I can see that," she replied with a smile. "Did you have a good trip?" "Fantastic. I was with Grandpa and a whole African tribe. They were friends of his," he added helpfully. Grandma played along. "Oh my, what happened?" "We were surrounded by dozens of ferocious lions that came out of nowhere." "My goodness. What did you do to escape?" she asked. "Me? Nothing," he replied modestly. "It was Grandpa who did everything. He unrolled a large cloth and we hung it up, right in the middle of the savannah." "A cloth? What kind of a cloth?" asked Grandma, mystified. Arthur was already climbing on a crate to reach the top shelf. He took down a book and opened it quickly to the right page. "There, see, like this." He painted a canvas that he hung in a circle around us. That way, the wild animals saw only the painted scenery. So they turned away and couldn't find us. It was as if we were invisible, he concluded with satisfaction. "Invisible, perhaps, but not odorless," Grandma responded. Arthur stared at her blankly. "Did you take your shower this morning?" she asked. "Well, I was about to, but then I found this book, and it was so interesting that I forgot everything else," he confessed, leafing through the pages. "Look at all these drawings. This is the work that Grandpa did for the most isolated tribes. Hardly anyone else has ever seen or heard of them." Grandma glanced down at the drawings, which she knew by heart. "What I see is that he was more interested in African tribes than in his own," she replied, smiling. Arthur was immersed in the drawings. "Look at this one." He dug a super deep well and invented an entire system with bamboo to transport water more than a mile away. "It's ingenious, I know, but to be fair, the Romans invented that system long before he did." "They are called pipelines," Grandma reminded him. This was a page of history that Arthur had totally missed. "The Romans. I've never heard of that tribe," he said. Grandma smiled. "It was a very old tribe that lived in Italy a long time ago," she explained. "Their chief was named Caesar." "Like the salad?" Arthur asked. "Yes, like the salad," replied Grandma, smiling once again. "Come on, let's straighten up. We have to go into town to do some shopping." "Does that mean no shower today?" asked Arthur with delight. "No, it just means no shower right now. You can take one when we get back. hurry up," Grandma ordered. Arthur carefully rearranged the books that he had scattered, while Grandma put back the African mask. They had a proud look, all these warriors' masks, which had been given to her husband as a sign of friendship from various tribes. Grandma gazed at them a moment, remembering the adventures that she had shared with her husband, who had been missing now for 4 long years. She let out a deep sigh, as long as a memory. "Grandma, why did Grandpa leave?" The question resonated in the silence. She glanced over at Arthur, who was staring up at the portrait of Grandpa in his helmet and full colonial garb. Grandma searched for the right words. She moved toward the open window and took a deep breath. "That, Arthur, is something I would really like to know," she answered, closing the window. She remained there for an instant, looking down at the garden. An old garden gnome smiled up at her from the foot of an imposing oak tree that overlooked the place. How many memories had this old oak accumulated during its lifetime? It could probably tell this story better than anyone, but it was Grandma who continued. Grandpa spent a lot of time in his garden, near that old oak tree that he loved so much. He said that it was 300 years older than he was, and so it must have a lot of things to teach him without making a sound. Arthur perched on the edge of a chair, anticipating a story. I can still picture him at nightfall, with his telescope, observing the stars, said Grandma in a soft voice. The full moon was shining. It was magnificent. I could watch him for hours when he was like that, passionate, fluttering like a butterfly. Grandma smiled, replaying the scene in her memory. Then her smile faded and her face grew hard. And then one morning, both he and the telescope were gone, disappeared. That was almost 4 years ago. Arthur was a bit stunned. He disappeared just like that, without a word, a note, without anything. Grandma nodded sadly. It must have been something very important for him to leave like that, without telling us, she said with a touch of humor. She clapped her hands as if she were popping a soap bubble. "Come on, we're going to be late. Go put on your jacket." Arthur ran happily toward his room. Only children seem to have this ability to shift so quickly from one emotion to another, as if the heaviest things do not really have any weight before the age of 10. Grandma smiled at this thought. For her, it was often difficult to forget the weight of things, even if only for a few minutes. Grandma adjusted her hat one more time. She crossed the front garden toward her faithful old Chevrolet pickup. Arthur wriggled into his jacket as he ran up to the passenger side. A trip in this vehicle was like a journey on an antiquated spaceship, always an adventure. Grandma fiddled with 2 or 3 buttons and turned the key, which was as stubborn as a stuck doorknob. The motor coughed, crackled, then raced, jammed, became blocked, cleared itself, revved up, and finally started. Arthur loved the hum of the old diesel engine, which sounded very much like a manic washing machine. Alfred the dog, on the other hand, kept his distance from the truck, as if he couldn't understand why there needed to be all this noise for so little result. Grandma addressed him through the window. "Excuse me, Alfred, would it be possible, if it's not too much trouble, for you to do me a very big favor?" The dog lifted one ear. He knew that favors were often associated with rewards. "Watch this house," she ordered. The dog barked, not not really sure what he was agreeing to. "Thank you. That is very kind of you," Grandma responded. She released the emergency brake, shifted the Chevrolet into gear, and rolled toward the road. A cloud of dust bloomed in the slight wind that blew over the countryside. The truck traveled over the green hills, taking the small, twisting road to civilization, or the nearest thing to it. The town was not big, but it was very pleasant. Almost all of the shops and merchants could be found on the wide main street. Grandma parked in front of a store that, without a doubt, was the largest in the town. An imposing sign announced the name of the owner and its purpose: Davido Corporation Food Suppliers, which meant that it covered a lot. Arthur liked to go to the supermarket. It was the most modern store in this friendly little town, the closest thing he had to a space station. And since he imagined himself to be traveling by spaceship, there was a certain logic to his thoughts, even if it was a logic that only children could comprehend. Grandma primped a little before she got out of the car, knowing she would run into her friend Martin, the police officer. Martin was around 40 years old, rather jovial, with hair that was already turning gray. He had the look of a cocker spaniel, but a smile that saved everything. He hurried over and opened the supermarket door for Grandma. "Thank you, officer," said Grandma politely, pleased by his gentlemanliness. "You're welcome, Mrs. Suchat." "It is always a pleasure to see you in town," he added. "It is always a pleasure to run into you here, officer," replied Grandma, happy to play along. Martin twisted his hat in his hands, as if he had run out of conversation. "Do you need anything out there? Is everything all right?" "Well, there's no lack of chores, but it certainly prevents boredom. And then I have my little Arthur. It's nice to have a man around the house," she added, ruffling her grandson's hair. Arthur hated it when people patted him on the head. It made him feel like a stuffed toy. He pulled away with a frown, and this was all it took to make Martin even more nervous and awkward. "And the dog that my brother sold you, is he working out well?" "Better than that. He's a real beast," Grandma said with a chuckle. "Fortunately, my little Arthur, who knows so much about Africa, was able to tame him," she said. "The animal is now well trained, although we know that the wild beast is still sleeping inside him. Sleeping rather a lot, in fact," she added teasingly. Good, I am delighted," Martin stammered, as if he were not quite sure this was the right thing to say. He continued regretfully, "Yes, well, goodbye, Mrs. S." "Goodbye, officer," Grandma replied with a friendly nod. Martin watched them pass and gently let go of the door, the way one lets go of a sigh. Arthur used all of his strength to separate two shopping carts, which were evidently madly in love with each other. He found his grandmother already in one of the 4 aisles, shopping list in hand. Arthur let his feet slide to slow down his cart. He moved close to his grandmother in order not to be overheard by anyone else. "Grandma, wasn't that police officer flirting with you just a little?" he said bluntly. "Arthur, where did you learn that word?" she asked. "Well, it's true, isn't it? As soon as he sees you, he starts strutting like a duck and acting as if he is going to eat his hat. Mrs. S. this, Mrs. S. that. Arthur, stop," Grandma said. "Let's have some decorum. We do not speak about people by comparing them to ducks. Arthur shrugged. He wasn't convinced that he'd been rude. All he'd done was point out the truth. Grandma calmed down. "He is very nice to me, as is everyone in the village," she explained in a serious voice. "Your grandfather was well liked here because he helped people with his inventions, just as he did in the villages in Africa. And when he disappeared, people like Martin were a great comfort to me." The conversation had turned somber. Arthur felt it and stopped squirming. "Believe me, without their kindness, I would probably not have been able to stand the loneliness," Grandma admitted. Arthur remained silent. You don't always know what to say, and that's true whether you are 10 years old or 100. Grandma patted his head affectionately and handed him the shopping list. "Here, I'll let you do the rest. I know you like to. I have to go find something at Mrs. Rosenberg's. If you finish before I do, wait for me at the checkout register." Arthur nodded, already delighted at the prospect of traveling the aisles aboard his iron vessel on wheels. "Can I buy some straws?" he asked. Grandma gave him a big smile. "Of course, dear. As many as you like." That was all he needed to hear. He set off down the aisle with a grin. Grandma left the store and crossed the main street, being careful to look right and left, even if it wasn't absolutely necessary, given the rather light traffic in this town. Perhaps it was a reflex from an earlier time, when she and her husband had traveled in the great capitals of Europe and Africa. She entered the Rosenbergs' small hardware store, where even the doorbell had a story all its own. She was on a mission. It was Arthur's birthday and she had planned a special surprise. Mrs. Rosenberg appeared, popping out like a jack-in-the-box. She had been at the window for an hour, waiting for her friend to arrive. "He didn't follow you, did he?" she asked, too excited to say hello. Grandma gave a quick glance back over her shoulder. "No, I don't think so. I don't think he suspects anything. Perfect. The merchant bounced as she went back into the store. She bent behind the imposing counter, took out a package wrapped in brown paper, and placed it delicately on the old wood surface. "Here you are. Everything's there," she said with a smile that made her look as if she were 5 years old. "Thank you. You are wonderful. You cannot know how you have helped me with my surprise. How much do I owe you?" "What do you think?" "Nothing. I had a great time." Grandma was caught off guard, and her excellent upbringing forced her to insist, "Mrs. Rosenberg, that is very kind, but I cannot accept." Mrs. Rosenberg was already handing her the package. "Go on, don't argue, and hurry before he suspects something." She hustled her friend to the door. The two old ladies exchanged knowing smiles. "Go on, out with you," said Mrs. Rosenberg, "and I am counting on you to stop by tomorrow and tell me everything in the smallest detail." Grandma agreed with a smile. "I won't forget. See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow," said the hardware dealer, returning to her observation post at the corner of the window. Outside, Grandma opened the Chevrolet door and slipped the mysterious package under the seat. When Grandma met Arthur at the checkout counter at DeVito's, he was already emptying the contents of the cart onto the rolling belt, arranging everything in little trains, alternating pasta and toothpaste, sugar and apple shampoo, and a package of straws. "You found everything?" Grandma asked. Yes, replied Arthur, absorbed by the arrangements. A second package of straws passed under Grandma's nose. "I was afraid you wouldn't be able to read my writing." "No problem. And did you find what you were looking for?" Grandma experienced a moment of panic. Lying to a child can be the most difficult thing in the world. "Yes. No. In fact, it wasn't ready. Next week, maybe," she stammered, nervously filling the first bag with packages of straws. She was so distracted that it wasn't until the sixth package of 100 straws that she finally reacted. "Arthur, what on earth are you doing with all these straws? You said I could get as many as I wanted, didn't you?" "Yes, but that was just a figure of speech." "Well, that's the last one," he said with a charming grin. Grandma was at a loss for words. The old Chevrolet, more tired now than during the trip into town, was parked near the kitchen window, where it was easier to unload the groceries. Arthur began to pile packages on the window ledge. "I'll do that," Grandma said. "Go play while it is still daylight." Arthur didn't argue. He grabbed his bag full of straws and ran off barking. Or no, that was Alfred, chasing after him with equal joy. Grandma was now able to remove her mysterious package unseen and sneak it quietly into the house. Arthur turned on the long fluorescent light in the garage, which crackled a bit before lighting up the room. Out of habit, he grabbed a dart near the door and sent it flying to the opposite side of the room. "Bullseye." "Yes," he cried, waving his arms in a victory sign. He crossed the room to the workbench, which was littered with bits and pieces of a strange contraption. It consisted of several pieces of bamboo, carefully cut lengthwise and pierced. With small holes all over, Arthur enthusiastically opened each package of straws one by one. There were all kinds, in all sizes and colors. Arthur hesitated before selecting the first one, the way a surgeon chooses a scalpel before beginning an operation. He finally chose one and tried to fit it into the first hole in one of the pieces of bamboo. The hole was just a bit too small. No problem, Arthur simply took out his Swiss Army knife and widened the hole. The second attempt was an immediate success. The straw fit perfectly. Arthur turned to his dog, the lone privileged witness to this memorable event. "Alfred, you are about to see the greatest irrigation system in the entire region. Bigger than Caesar's, more perfect than Grandpa's. Here it is. The Arthur system." Alfred yawned, overcome with emotion. Arthur the builder crossed the garden, carrying his immense length of bamboo, pierced with a dozen straws. On his shoulder, Grandma, still occupied with putting away the groceries, saw him pass by the kitchen window and was momentarily struck speechless. She blinked a few times, then shrugged her shoulders. Arthur placed the bamboo on small, branched tripods he had built for this purpose. The whole thing was perched above a carefully dug ditch, at the bottom of which were small radish seedlings, regularly spaced. Arthur went back to the garage, found the garden hose, and began to unroll it. So far, so good. Arthur, under Alfred's anxious eye, attached the hose to the end of the bamboo, sticking it in place with pieces of multicolored modeling clay. He then turned the bamboo until the straws were positioned above each seedling. "This is the most delicate moment, Alfred," he said, quoting from one of his grandfather's books. The calibration must be correct to the exact degree in order to avoid a flood or the total destruction of the crop, he added in a serious voice, as if he were handling explosives. Alfred didn't particularly care about radishes. He trotted off and returned with his old tennis ball, which he dropped on top of a young seedling. "Alfred, this is really not the time," Arthur shouted. "And no civilians allowed on the work site." He picked up the ball and threw it as far as possible. Alfred took this as a sign that the game had begun, and he charged off, nose to the ground, in pursuit of his prey. While he was gone, Arthur finished his adjustments and ran over to the faucet on the wall of the garage. The dog returned, ball in mouth, but his master had disappeared. Arthur put his hand on the faucet and turned it slowly. "Please work," he prayed. He took off, running alongside the hose to arrive before the stream of water. Halfway there, he ran right past the dog, who had come in search of him. Alfred was completely bewildered by this new variation in the game, but he spun around and followed. Arthur threw himself to the ground and followed the stream of water on all fours as it filled the bamboo and ran through the straws one by one. Each young radish seedling was happily watered. Alfred put down his ball, intrigued by this machine that could pee on all the flowers at once. "Yes," shouted Arthur, grabbing his dog's paw and pumping it up and down cheerfully. "Congratulations. This is a remarkable work that shall be remembered by history, believe me," he said, speaking for Alfred. Grandma appeared on the porch, an apron around her waist. "Arthur, telephone," she yelled. Arthur let go of his dog's paw. "Excuse me, Alfred. It is probably the president of the water company calling to congratulate me. I will be back in a minute." Chapter 2. Arthur was so excited as he entered the living room that he managed, in his socks, to cross the entire room in a single slide. He grabbed the phone and nestled deep into the comfortable couch. "I made an irrigation system, just like Caesar. But in my case, it's for making salads. It's to help Grandma's radishes grow. With my system, they will grow twice as fast." He shouted into the telephone without pausing to find out who was calling. But it was 4 o'clock, and as was the case every day, it was most likely his mother. "That's lovely, dear. Who is this Caesar?" asked his mother. "He is one of Grandpa's colleagues," Arthur said with assurance. "I hope that you'll get here by nighttime so I can show you everything. Where are you?" His mother's voice was uneasy. "We are still in town, for the moment." Arthur was a bit disappointed, but today it would take more than this to wear down his victorious spirit. "Well, that's okay. If you get here tonight, you can see it tomorrow morning." His mother began speaking in her gentlest voice. "Arthur, we're not going to be able to come back right away, dear." Arthur's small body slowly deflated like a punctured balloon. "There are lots of problems here," his mother continued. "The factory has closed, and Daddy has to find another job," she admitted. "He could come here." "There's lots of work to do in the garden," Arthur replied. "I'm talking about a real job, Arthur. A job where he can earn some money so that all 3 of us can eat." Arthur thought about this for a few seconds. "You know, Mom, with my system, we can grow anything we want. not just radishes. Then we would have enough for all 4 of us to eat. Of course, Arthur, but people need money for more than just food. We need to pay the rent, and we could all live here. There's lots of room, and I'm sure that Alfred would be happy about it. Grandma, too. Listen, Arthur, don't make things more complicated. Daddy needs a job, so we have to stay here a few more days to look for something, she concluded gently. Arthur didn't understand why his mother refused even to consider all his sensible solutions. But kids are used to adults not thinking logically. Okay, he said. The subject was closed, and his mother's voice was once again sweet and light. But just because we aren't with you doesn't mean we aren't thinking about you, especially on a day like today, she said. Your birthday. Happy birthday, son, his father boomed into the phone. Arthur mumbled, thank you, in a monotone. His father tried to sound cheerful. So you thought we forgot? Well, we didn't. Surprise. A 10th birthday is not easy to forget. You're a big boy now. My own big boy. Grandma was watching from a corner of the kitchen, as if she knew the conversation was painful for her grandson. Did you like your gift? His father asked. He doesn't have it yet, you idiot. His mother growled in a low voice. She tried to cover up for her husband's mistake. I arranged it with Grandma, Arthur dear. Tomorrow you will go into town with her and you can choose whatever present you want. Not too expensive, though, added his father. Francis, growled Arthur's mother. I was joking, his father mumbled. Arthur sat like a stone, holding the receiver to his ear. Okay, well, we'll let you go, son, because the telephone isn't free and we can't let your mother go on and on. Through the telephone, it was possible to hear his mother smack his father on the head. So goodbye, son, and once more his parents began to sing together. Happy birthday to you. Arthur hung up, almost without emotion. It occurred to him that there was more life at the end of his bamboo pole than at the end of this telephone line. He looked at his dog, sitting expectantly in front of him, awaiting the news. It wasn't the president of the water company, said Arthur. He suddenly felt a real moment of loneliness, a hole inside that was round and dark. Alfred offered his ball one more time as a way of changing the subject, but a little song called their attention away from their sad thoughts. Happy birthday, Grandma sang in a full, happy voice. She appeared from the kitchen, carrying a large chocolate cake on a platter, 10 proud candles on top, to the rhythm of Alfred's barking. He couldn't stand for people to sing without him. She entered the room and placed the cake in front of Arthur. His face lit up. Grandma laid 2 small presents alongside the cake as she finished the song. Arthur threw his arms around his grandmother. You are the most beautiful and the most fabulous grandmother ever, he cried wholeheartedly. And you are the sweetest grandson ever. Go ahead, blow out the candles. Arthur took a deep breath, then stopped. It's too beautiful. Let them burn a little longer. Let's open the presents first. If you want to, Grandma relented, amused. That one is from Alfred. It's very nice of you to have thought of me, Alfred, said Arthur with some astonishment. Well, have you ever forgotten his birthday? Grandma asked. Arthur smiled at that and opened the little package. It was a brand new tennis ball. He was dumbfounded. Wow, We've never had a brand new one. It's awesome. Alfred barked, ready to play. Arthur prepared to throw the ball, but his grandmother intervened. If you could please wait until you're outside to play ball, I would really appreciate it, she said. Arthur nodded and hid the ball behind his back, between two couch cushions. He opened the next package. And that one is from me, Grandma said. It was a miniature racing car with a tiny key on the side for winding up the spring that served as a motor. It's magnificent, Arthur cried. He immediately wound up the little car and placed it on the floor. With a few growls to simulate the rumbling of a motor, he released the car, which shot across the living room, followed closely by Alfred. The car ricocheted several times and ended up shaking off the dog by sliding under a chair and out the other side. Arthur roared with laughter. I think he prefers the car to the ball. The car ended up against the front door, with Alfred still scrabbling under the chair looking for it. They're doing the best they can. I am sure that as soon as your father finds a job, everything will be all right. They missed my birthday other years, too. I don't think a new job is going to change anything, Arthur said. Unfortunately, there was nothing Grandma could say or do to prove him wrong. Arthur prepared to blow out the candles. First, make a wish, his grandmother suggested. Arthur did not have to think for very long. I wish that on my next birthday, Grandpa will be here to share it with me. It was hard for Grandma to hold back a tear. She touched her grandson's face. I hope that your wish will come true, Arthur, she said. Go on now, blow them out, unless you want to eat a cake covered with wax. As Arthur took a deep breath, Alfred found the little car, squeezed next to the front door. But a menacing shadow loomed at the window, so menacing that the dog did not dare get close enough to pick up the toy. The shadow approached and opened the door, causing a gust of air to swoop through and blow out the candles at the very moment that Arthur was preparing to do so. The silhouette advanced with slow, loud footsteps toward the living room. Frozen with fear, Grandma and Arthur stayed very still. The visitor finally moved into the light. He was about 50 years old, an imposing figure with an emaciated face that was unwelcoming, both up close and from afar. The man removed his hat and smiled a smile that seemed to hurt his face. Have I arrived at a good time? He asked. Grandma recognized him. It was the notorious Davito, owner of the no less famous Davito Corporation. Food suppliers. This sinister man had been trying to steal Grandma's property for years. He said he wanted to use the land for his corporation, to build apartment buildings. But Arthur and Grandma knew that Davito didn't need this land. He was just being malicious because it used to belong to his family and he wanted it back. And Grandpa wasn't around anymore to stop him. Luckily, so far all of Davito's attempts to get the land had been thwarted so far. No, Mr. Davito, you have not arrived at a good time. You are arriving at the worst possible time, and I would be tempted to say as usual, Grandma retorted fiercely. Even a minimum of politeness requires that when you visit people without prior notice, the least you can do is ring the doorbell. I did try to ring, Davito defended himself, and I can prove it. He smugly held up a piece of chain. One day that bell is going to fall on someone's head, he predicted. The next time I will blow my car horn instead. It would clearly be safer. I don't see any reason why there should be a next time, Grandma replied. As for today, your visit is ill-timed. We are in the midst of a family gathering. DeVito noticed the cake, with the candles all blown out. Oh, look at the beautiful cake. Happy birthday, my boy. So how old are you? He quickly counted the candles. 8, 9, 10. My, how time flies. He pretended to marvel. I remember when he was that small, running around after his grandfather. How long ago was that? He said, deliberately turning the knife in the wound. It was 4 years ago, Grandma replied with dignity. 4 years already? Why, it seems like only yesterday. He added with barely concealed cruelty. He searched his pockets. If I had known it was your birthday, boy, I would have brought something. But in the meantime, he took a candy from his pocket and offered it to Arthur. Here you go, happy birthday. Grandma glanced at her grandson. Her thoughts were clear. Arthur took the candy as if it were a pearl. Oh, how lovely. You really shouldn't have. Besides, I already have some just like it. DeVito controlled himself, although he was dying to scold this impertinent youngster. I also have something for you, he said vengefully to Arthur's grandmother. Grandma cut him off. Mr. DeVito, I don't need anything from you except the chance to spend this afternoon alone with my grandson. So whatever the purpose of your visit may be, I would ask you to please leave this house, where you are most certainly not welcome, immediately. Despite her polite tone of voice, Grandma left no doubt as to the content of her message. DeVito was oblivious. He had found what he was looking for in his pockets. Ah, here it is, he said, producing from his pocket a paper neatly folded in quarters. Since the mailman only comes to your house once a week, I made a small detour in order to save you from having to wait. Some news it's better to have as quickly as possible, he explained with false concern. He handed the paper to Grandma, who took it and reached for her glasses. It's a form stating the expiration of your deed of ownership for this property, due to non-payment of taxes, he said. It comes directly from the governor's office. Grandma began to read, her expression already annoyed. It had to be taken care of personally, DeVito noted. This matter has gone on for too long. Arthur did not need to read the document in order to shoot the awful man a poisonous look. DeVito smiled like a snake. The paper terminates your deed of ownership of this property as of today, and at the same time validates my deed of ownership. I suppose that explains why I feel so at home here. He chuckled evilly. But rest assured, he added, I am not throwing you out tonight, treating you the way you treat me. I will give you time to gather your things. Grandma awaited the worst. I am giving you 72 hours, DeVito said. In the meanwhile, please, make yourselves at home in my house, he concluded maliciously. If Arthur could have thrown a dagger with a look, DeVito would have been a goner. As for Grandma, she seemed strangely calm. She methodically reread the last paragraph of the letter before saying, I see a bit of a problem here. DeVito twitched, uneasy. Oh, really? What problem? Your good friend the governor forgot just one thing in his eagerness to be of service to you. What is it? DeVito asked. Too casually, he forgot. To sign it, Grandma handed him back the paper. Davito was speechless. Gone were the nice words, the malevolent gestures. He stood holding the paper in front of him, mouth opening and closing like a carp. Arthur restrained himself from jumping for joy. That would give Davito too much importance. So you are still here in my house, Grandma continued, until you can prove otherwise. And since I do not possess your legendary tact, am giving you only 10 seconds to get out before I call the police. Davito searched for a clever parting remark, but he couldn't think of one. Arthur picked up the phone. You know how to count to 10, don't you? The boy asked him. You are going to regret your insolence. Believe me, Davito threatened, backing out of the room. He turned on his heels and slammed the front door behind him with such force that his predictions came true and the doorbell fell on his head. Half senseless, blinded with pain, he blundered into the wooden column, missed the step, and fell right into the gravel. Finally, he reached his car, slammed the door on his jacket, and took off in a cloud of dust. The sky looked as if it had been painted orange. As for the sun, it seemed to be trying to roll along the hill, as it did in the marvelous engraving that Arthur caressed with the tips of his fingers. The scene was an African savanna, bathed in the light of the end of day. You could almost feel the heat. Arthur was in his bed, the smooth headboard smelling of apples, with a large leather book on his knees. He had chosen one of his grandfather's books, as he did every night, to accompany him to the land of dreams. He was especially excited about this one, because it had been hidden behind all the others, and he'd never seen it before. Grandma sat down next to him and beamed at the sight of the engraving. Every night we witnessed this marvelous spectacle, and it was precisely in this setting that your mother was born, Grandma recounted as Arthur drank in her words. While I was giving birth in a tent, your grandfather was outside painting this landscape for me. Arthur smiled. Tell me again what you were doing in Africa, he asked. I was a nurse, and your grandfather was an engineer. He built bridges, tunnels, roads. That is where we met. We were both there because we wanted to help and to learn more about the marvelous people of Africa. Arthur carefully turned the page and moved to the next one. It was a drawing in color of an African tribe in full official dress, loaded down with necklaces and amulets. All the people were long and thin. They looked like distant cousins of giraffes, with the same strange gracefulness. Who are they? Asked Arthur, fascinated. The Bogomatasale, his grandma answered. Your grandfather was tied to them in friendship, and to their incredible history. That was more than enough to excite Arthur's curiosity. Really? What history? Not tonight, Arthur. Maybe tomorrow, said Grandma, who was already very tired. Come on. Please, Grandma, Arthur pleaded. I still have to straighten up the kitchen, Grandma protested. But Arthur was shrewder than her fatigue. Please, just 5 minutes. It's my birthday, he said in a voice that could charm a cobra. Once again, Grandma couldn't resist. All right, 1 minute, no more, she conceded. No more, swore Arthur with a grin. Grandma made herself more comfortable, and her grandson followed suit. The Bogomatasale were very tall. There wasn't one adult who was less than 7 feet tall. Life is not easy when you are that tall, but They believed that nature made each of them that way, and that somewhere there were others who would complement them, a brother that would bring you what you do not have, and vice versa. Arthur was captivated. Grandma felt herself carried away along with her audience. The Chinese call that yin and yang. The Bogomatisali gave it the name Brother Nature. And for centuries, they searched for their other half, those who would finally bring them balance. Did they find them? Asked Arthur immediately, too eager to leave any time for suspense in the narrative. After more than 300 years of searching throughout all the nations of Africa. Yes, Grandma confirmed. They found a tribe that was viewed by many as an object of scorn. This tribe lived right next to the Bogomatisali, only a few feet away, to be precise. How is that possible? Marveled Arthur. This tribe was called the Minimoys, and all of its people measured. Barely 3/4 of an inch tall. Grandma turned the page, and they found a picture of the famous miniature tribe, posing in the shade of a dandelion. Arthur was amazed. He had never had an inkling of these wonderful stories. Grandpa had always preferred tales of engineering accomplishments. Arthur flipped from one page to the other, studying the difference in size. And they got along well, he asked. Marvelously, Grandma assured him. Each helped to do the work the other could not do. If one was cutting down a tree, the other would exterminate the insects inside it. The extremely large and the extremely small were made for each other. Together, they had a unique and total vision of the world that surrounded them. Arthur was fascinated. He turned the next page, and his gaze fell on a tiny creature that made his heart do a somersault. Two large blue eyes under rebellious red bangs stared back at him with a look that was as mischievous as a young fox, with a small smile that could melt even the hardest heart. Arthur did not yet realize that he had fallen in love. For the moment, he only felt a glowing warmth in his stomach. Grandma watched him out of the corner of her eye, delighted to be witnessing this magical moment. Arthur cleared his throat a few times and finally managed to say a few words. Who is this? He stammered. That is Princess Selenia, the daughter of the king of the Minimoys, Grandma replied. At least, that is what your grandfather told me. He drew this right before he disappeared. He was always talking about the Minimoys, even long after we left Africa. She's beautiful, Arthur blurted out, before getting a hold of himself. That is, what I meant to say is, very nice. The story, I mean, it's incredible. Your grandfather was an honorary member of the Bogomatisali tribe. He did a great deal for them. He built wells, irrigation systems, dams. He even taught them and the Minimoys how to use mirrors to communicate with each other and to transport energy, Grandma said proudly. When it came time for us to depart, in order to thank him, they gave him a bag full of rubies, each one bigger than the next. Wow, Arthur exclaimed. But your grandfather didn't know what to do with this treasure. He really wanted something very different, Grandma confided. He wanted the secret that would make it possible for him to visit the Minimoys. Arthur was mesmerized. He looked first at the drawing of Princess Selenia, then at his grandma. And they gave it to him, he asked, as nonchalantly as possible, although he felt as if the answer could change his life. I never found out, Grandma answered. The war had started. so I returned home to be an army nurse, while your grandfather enlisted to fight in Africa throughout the war. For 6 years, I had no news from him, she said. Your mother and I were convinced that we would never see him again. As brave as he was, there was a good chance he had died in combat. And then, one day, I received a letter with a photo of this house, asking us to come live here with him. And then, asked Arthur excitedly, then I fainted. It was a bit too much all at once, Grandma confessed. Arthur burst out laughing, imagining his grandmother with all 4 limbs in the air, a letter clutched in her hand. And then what did you do? I came here. And here we stayed, she said happily. Grandpa was very strong, wasn't he? Arthur asked. Grandma stood up and closed the book. Yes, and I am most certainly too weak. The minute is up, time for bed. She pulled down the covers so that Arthur could slide his legs in. I would like to find the Minimoys, too, he added, pulling the blanket right up to his chin. If Grandpa returns someday, do you think he will tell me the secret? If you are a good boy and you do as I say, I will ask him for you, Arthur hugged her. Thank you, Grandma. I knew I could count on you. Now go to sleep, she said firmly. Arthur turned around and threw himself on his pillow, pretending to be asleep already. Grandma kissed him affectionately, picked up the book, and turned off the light, leaving Arthur to his dreams of Selenia. She quietly entered her husband's study, avoiding the squeaky floorboards, and returned the precious book to its place. Then she stood for a moment before the portrait of her husband. She let out a sigh that seemed enormous in the quiet of the night. We miss you, Archibald, she confessed. We really miss you very much. Chapter 3. The garage door was so heavy that opening it was like opening the drawbridge of a castle, and it always took Arthur a few seconds to recover. He got down on his knees and took his racing car out of the garage. 800 horsepower in only 3 inches. All it took was imagination, and that was something Arthur never lacked. He put his finger on the car and rolled it, adding a soundtrack of growls, vrooms, and other noises worthy of a Ferrari. He also lent his voice to the 2 drivers that he imagined on board, and to their boss, who was guiding them from afar. Gentlemen, I want a complete report on our worldwide irrigation system, he said, cupping his hands as if talking through a megaphone. Right, Chief, he replied, pretending to be the driver. And be careful with this new car. It is extremely powerful, added the boss. Okay, Chief. Don't worry, the driver assured him as he left the parking space and drove deep into the garden grass. Grandma pushed open the front door. She was carrying a large basket full of wet laundry to the end of the garden to hang on the clothesline. Arthur steered his car as it descended into the ditch, and then chugged alongside the impressive irrigation system. Patrol car to Central. Everything appears to be in order, the driver reported. But the patrol spoke too soon. All at once, an enormous and brand new tennis ball loomed out of nowhere, completely blocking the passage. Oh no, directly ahead. It's a disaster. Patrol, what's happening? Report, cried the chief, who could see nothing from his office. It's a landslide. No, it's not a landslide. It's a trap. It's Bigfoot. Alfred had just put his nose against the other side of the tennis ball and was wagging his tail as hard as he could. Central to patrol. Be careful of that tail. It's a dangerous weapon, warned the boss. Don't worry, Chief. He seems calm for the moment. We'll take advantage of that to clear the road. Send in the crane. Arthur's arm was immediately transformed into a mechanical crane with all the right accompanying noises. After a few maneuvers, Arthur's handclaw succeeded in catching the ball. Ejection, cried the driver. Arthur's arm extended in through the ball as far as possible. Not surprisingly, Bigfoot ran right after it. The road is clear, and we have gotten rid of Bigfoot. The driver proudly announced. Well done, patrol, said the chief. Continue with your mission. Grandma, meanwhile, had continued on her mission as far as the second clothesline, where she began to hang the sheets. Far in the distance, on the top of the hill, a small cloud of dust signaled the arrival of a car. But it was not the day for the mailman or for the milkman. Now what is it? Grandma worried. Arthur, unaware of the approaching vehicle, was still on patrol, where a new drama was taking place. Bigfoot had returned. His paws were on the side of the trench, the ball in his mouth, ready to be released. Inside the car there was chaos. Oh no. We are doomed, cried the assistant driver. Never, the driver decreed in Arthur's most heroic voice. Arthur furiously wound the key on the side of the car. Bigfoot dropped his bomb into the trench. Hurry, begged the assistant, or we are all going to die. The ball rolled along the trench toward them. Arthur pointed the car in the direction for escape. Bonsai, he yelled, even though the Japanese expression was not exactly appropriate for the situation. The car leaped forward, propelled by the wind from the ball that was hurtling toward it. The racing car cut neatly across its path, like a fighter plane, shooting swiftly out of harm's way. The ball rolled off into the distance, but unfortunately, the car was now on a collision course with the side of the trench, which appeared to be an impassable wall. We're doomed, moaned the assistant. Hang on, replied Arthur, the courageous driver. The racing car arrived at the foot of the wall and shot up it, almost vertically. It flew through the air, landing on the ground in a magnificent series of spins before finally rolling to a stop. The chain of events had been sublime, almost perfect. Arthur was as proud as a peacock who'd invented the wheel. Well done, said the assistant, exhausted. It was nothing, my boy, replied Arthur with the nonchalance of an old veteran. A giant shadow suddenly loomed over the little racing car, that of a much bigger racing car, belonging to the sinister DeVito. The larger car rolled to a stop, leaving Arthur's car trapped underneath. Through the windshield, DeVito looked very pleased with himself. Bigfoot Alfred trotted up with his toy again, but from Arthur's expression, he could tell that this was not the best time for games. With a small whine, he dropped the ball, which rolled to the end of the asphalt, crossed under the real car, and came to a stop directly under DeVito's foot as he stepped out of the vehicle. The result was unexpected. DeVito stepped on the ball, slipped, fell, and found his arms and legs pinwheeling in the air. Arthur was on the ground too, but that's because he was laughing so hard. Patrol to Central. Bigfoot has just claimed another victim, announced the driver. Alfred barked and wagged his tail. DeVito scrambled up as best he could and brushed himself off. Angrily, he grabbed the ball and threw it as far as possible. A tearing sound ripped through the silence, and at the same time, through the underarm seam of his jacket. The ball landed in the water tank on the garage. Furious about the damage to his jacket, but satisfied with his throw, Davito rubbed his hands together. "Your turn, Central," he said to Arthur vengefully. Arthur just looked at him without saying anything. Davito spun on his heel and headed toward the end of the garden, where Grandma had just hung one of the sheets lengthwise across the clothesline and was turning to get another from her basket. She found herself face to face with Davito. "You startled me," Grandma scolded. "I am so sorry," said Davito, obviously lying. "Spring cleaning. Do you need a hand?" "No, thank you. What do you want now?" asked the old lady. "I wanted to apologize. I made a mistake the other evening, and I came to make amends," he said slyly. Once again, Davito whisked a piece of paper out of his pocket and flourished it under Grandma's nose. "Here, it is fixed. Now the paper is properly signed." He took a clothespin and hung the paper on the line. "You didn't waste any time," Grandma conceded, sick to her stomach. "Oh, it was a lucky coincidence," he said. "I was going to church, like I do every Sunday morning, and who should I meet there but the governor?" "You go to church on Sunday? That's funny. I've never seen you there," Grandma replied implacably. "I usually stay in the back, out of humility." "I was surprised myself not to see you there this morning," he answered. "On the other hand, I did run into the mayor, who confirmed my deed of sale." Davito took out a new letter that he pinned to the clothesline next to the previous one. "I also ran into the notary, and he validated the purchase," he said, hanging up yet another letter. "Moreover, the banker and his charming wife have hereby transferred your debt on the property to me." A fourth letter was pinned next to the others. Unnoticed by the adults, Arthur had begun to climb up the north side of the water tank. Alfred was watching from below. He did not look very happy about the situation. Davito continued to hang up letters. He was already on the 9th. The surveyor, who authenticated the property lines, he continued relentlessly. And finally, the police commissioner, who countersigned the notice for your eviction within 72 hours. He proudly hung up the 10th and last letter. "That makes 10, my lucky number," he added with sadistic glee. Grandma was vexed and speechless. "There. So, unless your husband returns to do his taxes, or you settle your debts within the next 72 hours, this house will be mine." "You have no heart, Mr. Davito," Grandma finally managed. "Not true. I have a rather generous nature. That is why I have previously offered you a good sum for this miserable property. But you wouldn't hear of it. The house has never been for sale, Mr. Davito." Grandma reminded him for the 100th time. "See what a bad attitude you have," he replied. Arthur balanced himself on the edge of the large tank, which was half full of water. The tennis ball floated peacefully on the surface. Arthur imagined himself as an acrobat. He squeezed his legs around the wooden edge and reached out for the ball. Alfred began to whine. It's funny how animals can sense an impending drama. And in fact, there was a crack. A small one, almost ridiculous, but enough to send Arthur plummeting into the tank with an enormous splash. Alfred trotted off, his tail between his legs. Why do you want this tiny piece of land and this miserable house so much? Grandma inquired acidly. I plan to build apartments here, as you know, and I want it for sentimental reasons. This land belonged to my parents, the businessman replied coldly. I know. It was your parents who generously offered it to my husband for all of the services he had done for the region. Do you really want to violate the wishes of your late parents? Grandma questioned. Davido was clearly ill at ease. Late. That's a good word. They are late, just like your husband is late, and they left me all alone, Davido said edgily. Your parents did not abandon you. They died during the war, Grandma corrected. The result was the same, he shouted. They left me alone, and so it is alone that I intend to conduct my business. And if your husband has not paid his debt by noon 3 days from now, I shall be obliged to evict you, whether your laundry is dry or not. Davido lifted his chin, turned around, and came face to face with Arthur, who was standing there drenched from head to foot. The businessman clucked disapprovingly, sounding rather like a turkey when it finds out that it has been invited for Christmas dinner. You should hang him out to dry, too, he added in a mocking tone. Arthur glared at him. Davido headed off toward his car, still clucking. He slammed the door, turned on the engine, and let the wheels spin, kicking up a thick cloud of dust. The little racing car was knocked out of the car's shadow, somersaulted a few times, rolled backward a bit, and fell into the opening of a drain pipe. Davido took off, followed by his thick cloud, which settled over all the clothes that were hung out to dry. Arthur and his grandmother were also coated with the yellow dust. Exhausted, Grandma sat down on the front steps. My poor Arthur. This time, I don't think I will be able to stop that greedy Davido, she said sadly. Didn't he used to be a friend of grandfather's? Arthur asked, sitting down next to his grandmother. At first he was, she admitted. When we arrived from Africa, Davido couldn't tear himself away from your grandfather. He stuck to him like glue, but Archibald never really trusted him, and he was right. Will we have to leave the house? Asked Arthur worriedly. I am afraid so, the poor woman admitted. Arthur was overwhelmed by the news. How could he live without this garden, the place for all his games, his sole refuge? And where would his grandmother go? He had to find a solution. What about the treasure, the rubies offered by the Bogo Matasale? He asked, full of hope. What did Grandpa do with all that? Couldn't we use it to save the house? Grandma pointed to the garden. It's out there somewhere. You mean the treasure is hidden in the garden? Arthur asked. That's what your grandfather told me. So well hidden that even though I have dug everywhere, I have never been able to find it, Grandma confessed. Arthur was already on his feet. He grabbed the little shovel leaning against the wall and ran to the middle of the garden. What are you doing, dear? Grandma asked. Do you think I'm just going to sit back for 72 hours while that vulture steals our house from us? Replied Arthur. I am going to find that treasure. Arthur energetically jammed his shovel into a small patch of grass and began to dig like a bulldozer. Alfred was delighted with this new game, barking encouragement and running in circles. Grandma could not help smiling. He is the spitting image of his grandfather, she remarked. Brushing off her knees, she noticed she was covered with dust. She got up with difficulty and went back into the house to change her clothes. A few drops of sweat had beaded on Arthur's forehead. He was already digging his third hole. Suddenly, his shovel hit something hard. Alfred barked, as if he could sense something. Arthur got down on his knees and continued digging with his hands. "If you found the treasure, you really are the best dog in the world," Arthur said to his dog, who was wagging his tail almost hard enough to take flight. Arthur burrowed into the ground a little more, brushed his hand along the object, and pulled it out of the ground. It was a bone. "That's not the kind of treasure we're looking for, you wild animal. We need a real treasure," exclaimed Arthur, throwing away the bone and starting to dig a new hole. The door to Archibald's office opened slowly. Grandma took a few steps in and looked around at the space. It was a real museum. She carefully took down one of the African masks and looked at it for a moment. Her eye caught that of her husband, gazing down from his portrait. "I am sorry, Archibald, but we no longer have a choice," she said bitterly. She lowered her eyes and left the room, the African mask under her arm. Arthur reached the bottom of a new hole, where he found yet another bone. Alfred pretended to be surprised, too. "Did you rob a butcher shop or something?" Arthur asked him in an exasperated voice. Grandma came out of the house with the mask, which was carefully wrapped in paper so her grandson wouldn't see it. I have to do some shopping in town," she said. "Do you want me to go with you?" Arthur asked politely. No, continue to dig. That's a good idea. After all, you never know." She quickly got into the old Chevrolet and started the engine. "I won't be long," she cried over the noisy motor. The pickup took off in a cloud of dust. Arthur was somewhat perplexed by the sudden departure of his grandmother, but duty called. He returned to digging. Chapter 4. The pickup came to a halt in the center of a large city. This was nothing like the charming village where Grandma regularly did her shopping. This was a real metropolis, several miles away. Here the shops displayed their wares to hundreds of curious shoppers. Here everything seemed prettier, bigger, richer. Grandmother held her head high, determined not to let the big city make her feel small. She stopped in front of a shop and took a business card out of her purse, verifying that she was at the correct address. She entered the small antique shop. At least it appeared small from the window, but inside it seemed to go on forever. Hundreds of objects and pieces of furniture of all kinds and from all periods were piled high. Fake Roman gods, made of stone, stood next to genuine Mexican saints, made of wood. Fossils spilled out from porcelain vases like an invitation to massacre. Old books bound in leather leaned next to simple paperbacks and seemed to coexist peacefully despite their differences in age and language. Behind the counter, the owner was reading the newspaper. Part antique dealer, part pawnbroker. Nothing about the man inspired trust. As Grandma approached, wading through the junk, he did not even bother to look up. "Can I help you?" he said automatically. Grandma jumped at the sound of his voice. "Excuse me," she said, nervously showing him the business card. "You were at our house some time ago, and you mentioned if one day we wanted to sell some of our old furniture or objects." "Yes, that is possible," he replied vaguely. "Well, I have an object that comes from a personal collection," Grandma stammered. "I would like to know if it has any value." The man sighed as he put down his newspaper and slipped off his glasses. He folded the paper and took the mask into his hands. "What is this?" he asked. "A carnival mask." "No, it is an African mask. This one belonged to the chief of the Bogo-Matasele tribe. It is unique," said Grandma with pride and respect, hiding her resentment at having to let go of such a beautiful artifact. The antiques dealer seemed interested. He studied it for a minute. $1.50, he said with assurance. Grandma gasped. $1.50? That's impossible. This is a unique item of inestimable value, which the antiques dealer did not give her time to finish her sentence. Fine, $1.80. That's the best I can do, he said. This type of exotic item doesn't sell very well right now. People want practical items, concrete, modern, I'm sorry. Do you have anything else? Grandma was bewildered. If perhaps, I don't know, she stammered. What is selling well right now? The antiques dealer finally smiled. Without question, books. Arthur threw aside his shovel, discouraged. Alfred, on the other hand, was perfectly happy with his pile of bones. The garden now resembled a minefield. Arthur filled a large glass of water from the kitchen faucet and drank it down in one gulp. Then he went to Grandma's room, took down the key hanging on the bedpost, and headed for his grandfather's study. He entered slowly, lit one of the beautiful Venetian lamps, and sat down at the desk. For a long time, he stared at the portrait of his grandfather, who, despite his smile, remained silent. I can't find it, Grandpa, Arthur said sadly. I can't believe that you hid this treasure in the garden without leaving word anywhere, any sign or hint, anything that would help us to find it. It doesn't seem like you. The painting continued to smile. Archibald was still silent. Unless, maybe I haven't looked for it correctly. Arthur grabbed the first book above the desk and began to leaf through it. Several hours passed. Arthur had gone through almost all the books, piling them high on the desk. Night had finally fallen, and he ached all over. He finished with the book that his grandmother had read to him the night before. Once again, he saw the drawing of the Bogo-Matasele, then that of the Minimoys. He skipped a few pages and came across a much more disturbing drawing. It was an evil shadow, like an emaciated body, only vaguely human-looking. The face had no expression, and only 2 red points for eyes. A shiver ran through Arthur from head to foot. It was by far the ugliest thing he had ever seen in his short life. Under the drawing of the shadowy creature was handwritten, Maltazard the Cursed. Outside, in the darkness, 2 yellow eyes were trailing their way along the hilltops. It was an ordinary van, piercing the night with its powerful headlights. Guided by the full moon, the vehicle followed the winding road that led to the house. Arthur quickly turned the pages, trying to forget the nightmare vision of Maltazard as fast as possible. He found the drawing of Selenia, the Minimoy princess. This made him feel much better. He touched the drawing with the tips of his fingers and noticed that it was only loosely glued down. Carefully, he slid a thumbnail underneath and detached it, so that he could contemplate the princess a little closer. I hope that I will have the honor of meeting you one day, princess, he whispered to it. Alfred sighed pointedly. Jealous, Arthur said with a grin. The dog did not deign to reply. Just then they heard a vehicle rolling up-end parking outside. Arthur thought it was probably Grandma, returning at last. He absent-mindedly turned over the drawing and discovered another one on the back. The boy's face lit up. I knew he had left a sign, he yelped joyously. The drawing was a map to the land of the Minimoys. It was sketched in pencil, rather poorly drawn or perhaps done very quickly. There was also a sentence that Arthur read out loud. To find the country of the Minimoys, trust in Shakespeare. Who is that? He asked himself. He stood up and turned the map in all directions. Something about the location seemed oddly familiar. So the entrance to the Minimoys' world is here, next to this tree. Wait, I know this tree. And here's the house, and that way's north. He ran over to the window and threw it open. The map corresponded exactly to the view that he had from the study window. The large oak tree, the garden gnome, the moon, everything is there, exclaimed Arthur. We found it, Alfred. We found it. The Minimoys are in the garden. I know they will be able to help us. I bet Grandpa told them where the treasure is. He leaped up and down with joy, like a kangaroo that had swallowed a spring. He turned toward the door, eager to share his discovery with his grandmother. But instead, he ran straight into the antiques dealer with his two movers. Careful, young man, careful, said the antiques dealer, deftly steering him aside. Despite his surprise, Arthur had instinctively hidden the drawing behind his back. The man went out into the corridor again to speak to Grandma. It is open, ma'am, open and occupied. Grandma came out of her room and joined them. Arthur, I have told you that I do not want you playing in this room, she said nervously. She caught Arthur by the arm and pulled him back so the antiques dealer could pass. Please excuse him. Go on in, please, Grandma said politely. The antiques dealer glanced around the study, like a vulture checking that a corpse is really dead. There, now this is interesting, he said, with a calculating smile. Arthur discreetly tugged his grandmother's sleeve. Grandma, who are these people? He whispered in a worried voice. She wrung her hands. It's the man is here to appraise your grandfather's things. If we have to move, we might as well get rid of all this old stuff, she said, trying to convince herself as much as him. Arthur was dumbfounded. You're going to sell Grandpa's things. Grandma paused, a brief hesitation, a moment of remorse, then let out a long sigh. I am afraid that we don't have a choice, Arthur. Of course we do. Of course we have a choice, cried the boy, waving his drawing. Look, this will help us find the treasure. Grandpa left us a message. It's all here on the map. Grandma didn't understand. Where did you get that? It was under our noses all the time, in that book you read me last night, Arthur explained. But Grandma was too tired to listen to fantasies. Put that back where it belongs immediately, she said severely. Grandma, you don't understand. It's a map to find the Minimoys. They are out there, somewhere in the garden. Grandpa must have brought them back from Africa with him. And if we can find them, I am sure that they will be able to guide us to Grandfather's treasure. We are saved, he declared. Grandma wondered how her grandson could have gone mad in such a short time. This is no time to play, Arthur. Put that back where it belongs and keep quiet. You don't believe me. You think Grandpa was just telling stories. Grandma placed her hand on his shoulder. Arthur, you're a big boy now, aren't you? Do you really believe that the garden is full of tiny elves who are just waiting for you to visit so they can give you a bag of rubies? The antiques dealer whipped his head around like a fox catching a scent. Excuse me, he asked politely. No, nothing. I was speaking to my grandson, Grandma answered. The antiques dealer continued his inspection as if nothing had happened, but his ears were alert. Of course, if you also have jewelry, we buy that as well, he said, the way you would toss bread out to pigeons. Unfortunately, there are no jewels on the horizon, Grandma answered firmly. Once again, she turned toward Arthur. Now put that drawing back where it belongs, and fast. The boy obeyed reluctantly, while the antiques dealer read the banner hanging above the desk like a birthday garland. Words often hide other words, William S. The antiques dealer seemed amused by this enigmatic sentence. S for Socrates, he asked. No, S for Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, Grandma said. This rang a bell in Arthur's head, and he slid out the drawing again. He reread the phrase on the back. To find the country of the Minimoys, trust in Shakespeare. Ah, well, I was close, exclaimed the antiques dealer. Grandma threw him a sharp look. Yes, only 2,000 years out of the neighborhood. How quickly time flies, he said, trying to hide his ignorance. You are right, time does fly. So please hurry up and make your selection before I change my mind, Grandma answered. We'll take everything. The antiques dealer gestured to his men. Grandmother was speechless. Arthur started to slide the drawing into the back pocket of his pants, but he wasn't quick enough. Tusk, tusk. No cheating, my boy, said the antiques dealer with an inquisitor's smile. I said we will take everything. Regretfully, Arthur took the paper out of his pocket and handed it to the antiques dealer, who quickly placed it in his jacket pocket. That's right, my boy, said the dealer slyly, patting him on the head. The movers began their work. Furniture and objects disappeared with frightening speed, under the tearful eyes of the poor woman who was watching years of memories slip away. The scene was as sad as a forest going up in smoke. One of the movers grabbed the portrait of Archibald. Grandma stopped him as he passed, seizing the edge of the frame. No, not that, she said firmly. He said everything, the mover protested. Grandma began to yell. And I say everything except the portrait of my husband. The employee looked at his boss, who decided this might not be worth the trouble. Simon, leave her husband alone. He didn't do anything to you, joked the antiques dealer. He took the painting and held it out to the old lady. Here, take it, ma'am. A gift on the house. He had the nerve to add. The back door of the van was opened and the two movers piled in the last boxes. Arthur lay stretched out on the living room couch, watching his grandmother at the doorway as she finished her negotiations with the antiques dealer. The man counted out the bills and put the pile in her hand. There you go, $300 in cash, he announced proudly. That's a small sum of money for 30 years of memories, Grandma murmured. It's an advance, the merchant assured her. If I sell everything, you will have an additional sum of at least 10% per item. Marvelous, Grandma replied ironically. The antiques fair takes place in 10 days. If you change your mind, you can always come and get them before then, noted the antiques dealer. That is very kind of you, she replied. She opened the front door to escort the antiques dealer out and found herself face to face with a short man in a gray suit, accompanied by 2 policemen. There was no need for a detective to identify the short man as a sheriff. "Mrs. Suchat?" the lawman asked politely, although the tone of his voice left no doubt as to the purpose of his visit. "Yes," Grandma replied. One of the 2 police officers tried to reassure her with a small, friendly wave, and she realized it was Martin, her friend, from outside the supermarket. The man in gray continued, "I am Frederick Sinclair, the sheriff." The antiques dealer could tell it was time for a quick exit. "See you soon, ma'am. It was a pleasure doing business with you," he said, taking off into the night. The pile of bills that Grandma was holding in her hand caught the sheriff's eye. "I see I came at just the right time," he said. He pulled out a letter. "I have a notice against you demanding payment for work done on your house several years ago by one Ernest DeVito. It amounts to a sum of $185, to which has been added a late penalty of 6%, along with the court costs. That comes to a total of $290. Grandma looked at her pile of banknotes and handed them over. Dazed, the sheriff grabbed them, somewhat surprised at not having to fight for them. "May I?" he said, counting the bills with lightning speed. Arthur watched this scene from the couch. He was neither disturbed nor astonished, simply disgusted. He understood that his grandmother had been thrust into a downward spiral from which she could not escape. "Unless I am mistaken, $3 are missing," said the sheriff. "I don't understand. That should be exactly $300. Grandma replied with astonishment. "Do you want to count them yourself?" he asked, with great politeness and no doubt. There was little chance that he had made a mistake. He was like an undertaker. If he tells you that his client is dead, you can count on it. Grandma was overwhelmed. She slowly shook her head. "No, you must be right." In his van traveling through the night, the antiques dealer rubbed his hands together with satisfaction. That was a nice little deal. Well handled, he confided to his assistant, laughing. He dug his hand into his pocket. "Now, let's see what that little monster was trying to hide from us." He took out the paper that Arthur had given him so reluctantly and unfolded it with pleasure. It was a supermarket shopping list. Chapter 5. In the living room, it was Arthur's turn to unfold his paper, the drawing of Princess Selenia that he had subtly exchanged. Arthur studied the drawing as if it were his only hope. The sheriff continued with his business. "In spite of the small sums still due, I'm afraid the law is the law. I am going to have to seize property in order to recover the missing $3, he announced. Martin, the nice officer, felt obliged to intervene. "Wait," he took out his wallet. "There, $3. Now the account is clear," he said, handing over the money. The sheriff shifted awkwardly. This is very irregular, but given the circumstances, I accept." Grandma was on the verge of tears, but she managed to keep her dignity. "Thank you, officer. I will repay you as soon as I can. Don't worry about it, Mrs. S. I am sure that as soon as your husband returns, together you will find a way to pay me back," he said with great kindness. "It'll see to it," Grandma replied. policeman grabbed the sheriff by the shoulder and pulled him away. "You've done enough work for today, sir. We're leaving now." The sheriff did not dare contradict him. "Ma'am, my respects," he said as they walked away. Grandma closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. Stunned, the telephone next to Arthur rang. He picked up the receiver. "Hello. Arthur, dear. It's Mom. How are you?" whistled the voice in the receiver. "Great. Things are great," Arthur replied sarcastically. "Grandma and me were just great." Grandma came into the living room and made signs to her grandson that clearly meant don't tell them anything. "What have you been up to?" his mother asked, not really paying attention. "Straightening up," said Arthur. "It's amazing how many useless old things one can find in a house. But thanks to Grandma, we've thrown everything out." "Arthur, please, don't upset them," Grandma whispered. Arthur hung up the phone. "Arthur, did you just hang up on your mother?" Grandma asked, shocked. "Of course not. The line disconnected," he explained, heading for the stairs. "So where are you going?" "Stay here. She'll probably call you back in a minute." Arthur stopped in the middle of the stairs and looked hard at his grandmother. "They cut off the phone service, Grandma. Don't you see what is happening? You are caught in a trap that every hour is getting tighter and tighter. But I'm not going to let them do it. As long as I live, they will not have this house." Arthur had probably heard this expression in an adventure film, but he said it very well. He turned around and proudly climbed the stairs. Grandma picked up the phone and saw that he was right. The line had gone dead. "It's probably temporary." "That happens sometimes when there's a storm," she said. "It hasn't rained for more than a month." Arthur called down from the top of the stairs. The doorbell rang. "You see, that must be the repairman," Grandma reassured herself. She hurried to the door, where indeed, and much to her surprise, a workman in uniform was waiting. "Evening, ma'am," said the workman, tipping the brim of his hard hat. "Oh, you are just in time," said Grandma. "The telephone cut off just a moment ago. I think that the least they can do is warn people about something like that, don't you?" "I agree with you, ma'am," the technician politely conceded. "But I'm not here about the telephone. I'm from the electric company." He pointed to the badge sewn on his jacket as proof. "I have come to warn you that your electricity will be turned off soon because of lack of payment." He pulled out an official form and handed it to her. Arthur entered the empty study. Besides a few worthless objects, there remained only the desk, a chair, the banner, and the portrait of Grandfather. He angrily flopped down in the chair and reread the banner, thinking it was miraculous that it had been left behind. Clearly, the bit of cloth was of very little value, even if the advice that it gave was priceless. "Words often hide other words," Arthur reread out loud. The puzzle was right there in front of him. He was sure of it. "Help me, Grandfather. If words often hide other words, what is the secret that these words are hiding?" The painting remained silent. Grandma finished reading the blue form and gave it back to the workman. "And when will the electricity be turned off?" she asked. "Very soon, I think," the workman answered. At that exact moment, the lights blinked out through the entire house. "That was quick," Grandma said. "Don't move. I'll go find a candle upstairs." Arthur lit a match and brought it up to light a candle. He placed the candle on the desk and stepped back a few feet in order to better see the banner, the key to the riddle. Now is the time to be brilliant, he challenged himself. Words, often, hide other. Words, the candlelight accented the transparency of the banner. And Arthur suddenly thought he caught a glimpse of something. He took the candle in his hand, climbed up on the chair, and placed the light just behind the banner. Lit from behind, words appeared. Words hiding behind other words. Arthur grinned. Of course, he exclaimed. He ran the candle behind the banner and read the hidden message. He could almost hear the deep, hoarse voice of his grandfather, as if he were there in the room. My dear Arthur, I was sure I could count on you, and that you would see through this simple charade. Arthur grimaced. Not so simple, he answered his grandfather. The message continued. You must be close to 10 years old now to be so smart. On the other hand, I'm not so smart, because if you are reading these lines, I am probably dead. Arthur stopped for a moment, a chill running through him. Imagine his grandfather, once so alive, already dead. He could not even bring himself to think about it. The difficult task of finishing my mission is up to you. If you agree, of course. Arthur looked up at his grandfather's portrait. The confidence that the old man had had in him made his chest swell with pride. I do agree, grandfather, he said solemnly, before turning back to the message. I expected nothing less of you, Arthur. You are worthy of being my grandson, Grandpa had written. Arthur smiled, astonished by the old man's clairvoyance. Thank you, he answered. The writing continued. To find the land of the Minimoys, you must first know on what date the next passage will take place. There is only one opportunity each year. You must take the universal calendar that is on my desk and count the 7th moon of the year. On the night of the 7th moon, precisely at midnight, the light will open the door to the land of the Minimoys. Arthur couldn't believe it. Everything that he had imagined was true. The hidden treasure, the Minimoys, and Princess Selenia. He let out a small, happy sigh, then took hold of himself and bent toward the desk to find the calendar. Fortunately, the antiques dealer had left it behind. Arthur quickly consulted it and counted the full moons. For 5, 6, 7. He looked at the corresponding date. July 31st, the day after my birthday. That's tonight, he realized with alarm. Arthur turned toward the clock hanging on the wall. It read 10:56 p.m. That's in 1 hour, he cried, panic-stricken. Grandma, by candlelight, finished signing the paper that the technician had amiably handed her. There, the pink copy is for you. The blue is for me. One for the girls, one for the boys, he tried to joke, but the humor fell flat. Grandma remained as hard as a piece of marble. He continued hurriedly. To have the electricity reconnected, just go to the main office, weekdays between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. with a check, obviously. Obviously, echoed Grandma, before adding with curiosity. Tell me, why are you still working at this late hour? It's nearly midnight, isn't it? Believe me, I'm not happy about it, but the head office made me, confided the employee. They absolutely insisted that I come here this evening. They even paid me triple overtime. You'd think there was someone here that DGE doesn't like. DGE? Grandma inquired. DeVito General Electric, the technician explained. Ah, I understand now, Grandma sighed. Suddenly, an odd noise was heard coming from upstairs. It sounded like hammer blows. The technician uneasily tried another joke. "Looks like I'm not the only one working overtime tonight." "No, those are our ghosts," said Grandma slyly. "The house is full of them. You should probably go, because they really can't stand uniforms." The technician looked at himself from head to toe. No one was more in uniform than him. He smiled weakly, but just in case, opted to leave. "That's fine. Okay, I'll leave you alone now," he said, backing into the garden. As soon as he reached the limit of the candle's light, he turned and ran to his car. Grandma smiled, closed the door, and tilted her head to determine where those hammering sounds were coming from. Chapter 6. Arthur was madly banging on a section of the study wall, with the help of a hammer, of course. He hoped he'd understood the next part of his grandfather's message correctly. This looked like the plank he'd said to hammer on 30 times, but Arthur was not sure what was supposed to happen after all this pounding. 28, 29, and 30, he breathed. The last blow was harder than the others, and it made the small plank pop out of the wall. Arthur could see now that the piece of wood was mounted on a pivot. It was the door to a tiny hiding place. Arthur slipped his hand into the small space and pulled out a piece of paper. He unfolded it and quickly read, "Bravo. You have solved the second riddle. Here is the third and last. Go to the old radiator. Turn the valve toward the right. As many turns as there are letters in your first name. Then turn it back a quarter of a turn." Arthur squeezed under the window and knelt in front of the old radiator. He grabbed the valve and began to turn it. Arthur. A-R-T-H-U-R. He had no time to waste. "And now, I just have to turn it 1/4 to the left." He paused and took a deep breath, as if preparing himself for the worst. The worst arrived at the door. Grandma burst in, and Arthur jumped. "Now what are you doing?" "What was that hammering sound?" she asked, exhausted by this endless nightmare of a day. I am fixing Grandfather's radiator," Arthur stammered. He wondered if he should show her the messages. But she didn't believe him before. What if she didn't believe him now? And wouldn't she be proud if he found the treasure all by himself? He decided he should probably keep it a secret for now, the radiator, in the middle of the night. "And in the middle of the summer?" asked Grandma, not really fooled by his lie. "You never know. Sometimes winter arrives without warning. You're the one who says that all the time." Arthur replied sensibly, "It's true, I do say that. But usually in November," she pointed out. "I also say that it's almost midnight and therefore time for you to go to bed. And I've also told you 100 times that I don't want you in this room." "Why, there's nothing left in it now," Arthur replied sadly. Grandma realized that she no longer had any real justification, but she insisted on principle. "True, there are no more objects, but the memories are always here, and I don't want you to disturb them," she concluded. She walked over to the calendar on the wall and tore off the page for July 31st, revealing the page for August 1st. The torn-off page went into a small box, which was labeled "The Pays Without You" in black marker. The pile was rather large. "Go on. Off to bed." Arthur obeyed reluctantly, while Grandma locked the study door with the key, which she put back in its place on the post of her bed. She joined her grandson in his room as he finished putting on his pajamas. Grandma turned down his covers. The boy slid in without saying a word. A short story, but no more than 5 minutes, said Grandma gently, trying to make amends. No thanks, I'm tired, Arthur replied, closing his eyes. Grandma was a little surprised, but did not argue. She smoothed down his hair, took the candle, and went out the door, leaving the room bathed in moonlight. As soon as the door was shut, the boy jumped up and stretched. You can do it, Arthur, he said to himself. He half opened the door and listened. He could hear the sound of the shower. Grandma was taking advantage of the last few gallons of hot water. He slipped inside her bedroom. Steam was escaping through the partially opened bathroom door. Arthur entered quietly, using his toe to test all of the floorboards that were likely to squeak. He arrived at the bed and reached out his arm to get the key. Prize in hand, his eyes fixed firmly on the bathroom, he crept backward to the door. Suddenly, he bumped into something and let out a yelp of surprise. The something was in fact someone. His grandma, same family as her sly grandson, only with 50 more years of experience. You startled me, Arthur cried. I thought you were taking a shower. No, I was in the living room looking for my sleeping drops, she said, holding up the little bottle of herbal medicine. And I advise you to go back to bed as fast as you can if you don't want me to make you drink the entire bottle. She pulled the key out of Arthur's hands, and he went dejectedly back to his room. Grandma sighed, replaced the key on its nail, and followed him. By candlelight, she discovered the boy in bed with the sheets pulled up to his chin. You have to sleep now, Arthur. It is almost midnight. I know, said Arthur, panicked by the fact that time was passing and there wasn't anything he could do. I'll close your door with a key. That will help you to avoid any temptation, Grandma said kindly. Up close, one could hear Arthur gulp with alarm, but Grandma was too far away to hear. She smiled at him, went out, and locked the door behind her. Arthur pulled off the covers and got up right away. His sheets and his covers were already attached to one another. All he had to do was open the window and throw them out. He climbed onto the window ledge and slid down his makeshift ladder to the ground. Grandma placed the candle on the little night table next to her bed. The weak light still made it possible to read the time on the old alarm clock. It was 25 minutes to 12. The little flame also helped her count her drops, 3 exactly, at the bottom of a large glass of water, which she drank in a single gulp. She then refilled the glass with water in case she needed it during the night. She blew out the candle, placed her glasses on the little table, and stretched out, letting sleep overtake her. Arthur let himself drop from his cloth rope, which was too short to reach the ground. He got to his feet and ran as fast as he could to the front door. Alfred jumped up when he saw Arthur arrive. He, who guarded the front door so proudly, was astonished to see Arthur outside. How had his master gotten past him? Since the front door was locked, Arthur had to wriggle through the little flap door meant for the dog. For Alfred, it was one surprise after another. There was his master, walking on all fours and using his door. Almost by reflex, Arthur slid in his socks across the living room floor. The large clock was ticking and indicated the time, 20 minutes to 12. Climbing the stairs was easy enough, but he ran into problems at his grandmother's bedroom door. She had locked it. Oh no. Arthur had only a few minutes left to think. He peered through the keyhole to be sure that the study key was still hanging on the bedpost. It was the only bit of good news. Think of something, Arthur. Think of something, he said to himself. He stepped back, turned around, and examined everything around him very carefully, searching for a plan to grab onto. In the window above the bedroom door, he noticed that one of the panes was broken. Arthur had an idea. He ran down to the garage, weaving his way inside by the beam from his flashlight. He climbed on the workbench and took down one of the fishing poles carefully arranged along the wall. Alfred jumped up once more at the sight of his master, passing by with a fishing pole in his hands. The dog gave him a look that clearly said who on earth goes fishing at this time of night. Arthur found a magnet on the door of one of the kitchen cabinets. He carefully slid his small, multi-purpose Swiss Army knife behind the magnet and lifted it up, then attached it to the end of his fishing pole. Without a sound, but working as quickly as possible, Arthur piled chairs on the end table in the hall until they were high enough for him to reach Grandma's window with its broken corner. He climbed very cautiously up his makeshift scaffold and slipped the fishing pole through the small hole. The dog watched him uncomprehendingly. There were fish in Grandma's bedroom. Arthur carefully stretched out his pole, then lowered the line with the magnet toward the key on the bedpost. Alfred had to investigate. He got up and trotted toward the piled-up chairs, causing one of the floorboards to creak. Startled, Arthur was thrown off balance. He clung to the window ledge, wobbling precariously. The magnet swung back and forth in the room, knocking over the small vial on the night table, which began to drip into Grandma's glass of water. "Arthur," Grandma said, sitting up, half asleep. Arthur stood still, not moving even an eyelash, and prayed that Alfred would do the same. The dog obligingly froze, except for a very slight wag of his tail. Grandma listened to the silence. A few crickets, one or two frogs in the garden. Nothing alarming, but this silence was too good to be true. She reached for her glasses, not noticing the herbal sleeping drops dripping into her water. She opened her bedroom door and looked to the left, toward the stairs and Arthur's room. All she could see was the dog, sitting alone in the middle of the hall, with his tail wagging, as always. What she didn't see was Arthur directly behind her, high up on the chairs, his fishing pole in his hand. "It is time for you to go to bed too," Grandma ordered Alfred. Alfred slipped down the stairs, his tail between his legs. This was an order he understood. Why is it that nobody wants to go to sleep tonight? "Is it the full moon or something?" she muttered, going back in and closing the door. Arthur could finally breathe. It was a miracle that he had not been discovered. Grandma took off her glasses and placed them on the night table. She took the glass of water, into which the bottle of herbal sleeping drops had emptied itself, and drank it down in one gulp, making a face. The effect was instantaneous. Grandma fell back on the bed asleep, without even having time to turn down the covers. Arthur continued his precarious fishing expedition, while Grandma began to snore. The magnet slowly descended toward the key and attracted it, but the bedpost seemed to disagree, clinging to its prize. Arthur frowned and yanked on the line. The dog quietly climbed up the stairs again, wanting to know how the fishing expedition was progressing. He advanced toward Arthur, who was struggling on top of his makeshift scaffold. Alfred stepped again on the same creaking floorboard. The foot of the end table shifted. The pile of chairs lost its fragile balance. "Oh, no," Arthur yelled. Everything collapsed like a house of cards, making an awful din. The dog took off down the stairs at high speed, barking loudly. Arthur's head poked through the middle of a chair. The gust caused by the catastrophe had been so violent that the bedroom door swung open. Grandma had forgotten to relock it. Arthur disentangled himself and, peering into the room, realized that his grandmother was still stretched out on her bed, snoring contentedly. How could she possibly have slept through all that noise? He wondered. He entered the bedroom, walked toward the bed, and reassured himself that his grandma was all right. She must be alive if she's snoring like that, he thought. Then he noticed the overturned bottle and understood what had happened. He took the blanket and tucked in his dear grandma, whose face looked 30 years younger thanks to the sleep she was finally getting. "Sweet dreams, grandmother," he said, before picking up the key and disappearing out the door.